Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I am doing a book haul. So it has been 2 or 3 months since I have done a book haul. It's been a good chunk of time and I have a lot of books. Some of them I bought all at once and some of them I kind of slowly collected one by one, but in like 3 months I collected quite a few books. I've read a few of these at this point, but most of them are going to be going on my TBR shelf, so that is going to be expanding. I tried to sort of semi-organize them a little bit, but let's just get started. Starting with middle grade, I have City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. This is one of her newest releases. It just came out over the summer, and this follows a young girl who is able to see ghosts. Her parents are actually ghost hunters, and I think they end up in Edinburgh, Scotland, because her parents are ghost hunting there. And Cass, our main character, who is able to see beyond the veil and see ghosts, I think has to have a showdown or take down a evil ghost. But I am really looking forward to this one, and it has been getting a lot of buzz and a lot of positive buzz about it on BookTube, so hopefully it'll be really good. The other middle grade that I got is 9 from the Nine Worlds by Rick Riordan. This is a collection of short stories that go with his Magnus Chase trilogy. So Magnus Chase is the trilogy that Rick Riordan did that's all about Norse mythology. So the Magnus Chase trilogy is probably one of my favorite series by Rick Riordan. I love the characters in it so much, especially like Alex and Sam. They're just so great. And it is also one of his shortest series, because like most of Rick Riordan's series are like 5 or more books, and this is a trilogy, so I'm really glad that they put out some more stories about those characters, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Then on to YA, which is Wild Beauty by Anna Marie McLemore, and I read one of Anna Marie McLemore's books earlier this year, which was When the Moon Was Ours, and I really liked it. She writes magical realism, and which is a genre that I am kind of just getting into, but I'm really enjoying it. I have been wanting to read Wild Beauty for a while, but I really wanted to get it in paperback, and it just came out in paperback, so I got that. This follows a family of women who take care of a special garden, but their family is cursed that if any of them fall too deeply in love, the person that they love disappears. So they kind of try to avoid that, but then one day, like, a boy that they don't know just appears in their garden. He doesn't have memory of who he is, and so some of them seem to think that this is an omen. Some think it's a good omen and some think it's a bad omen, but they're also kind of trying to figure out, or help him to figure out, who he is and how he ended up there. Next up, I have 2 translated books. The first one I have here is Hexed by Thomas Olde Huvelt. I probably am saying that name very incorrectly, and I am sorry for that. But this is one that is kind of out of my general reading comfort zone for many reasons. It is a contemporary story, but more importantly, it's a horror/thriller story, which is not a genre that I think I have ever read before, and I am never especially interested in, but I thought I would try it. I have heard some pretty good things about this one, and it sounded like kind of interesting. It follows a small town where there was a witch, and she was an evil witch, and they had to bind her, but in binding the witch, they also bound the town, so nobody can leave the town, and they just kind of have to deal with this witch. Then somebody in the town puts something about the witch on social media, and then all hell breaks loose, and shenanigans happen from there. But it sounded really dark and creepy, and again, it's also different from the stuff that I normally read, because I do like witchy books. I like books that have witches in them, but usually I like books where like we like the witch, where we're like rooting for the witch, not where it's like an evil witch that we're trying to stop. So it's a little different from what I normally read, but I thought I would give it a try. And the other book that I have here is Maresi by Maria, I'm gonna say this last name very incorrectly, Turchinov. I'm so sorry, that's probably so wrong, but I got this because Kara, whose channel is Wild Book Garden, recommended this in, I think it was in her video that was feminist fantasy books. She talked about this one and it sounded really interesting, and she was so enthusiastic about it that I really wanted to give it a try. It takes place in an abbey. There are two main characters, one of who lives at the abbey, and the other is a girl who has just come to the abbey looking for refuge. But then there is fear among the people of the abbey that the people from this girl's past who are searching for her will come to the abbey and bring violence to them. Next up, I have Mind of My Mind by Octavia Butler. This is the first book in her Pattern Master series. Last year I read the prequel to this series, which is called Wild Seed, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I've been kind of interested in trying some of Octavia Butler's other books because I know that Wild Seed is not like one of the popular books of hers, but then this year I read Kindred by Octavia Butler, which was so good and I loved it. So now I want to try more of her books. I thought I would try continuing this series that I have already started. This is the first, like actually first book in the series that's not like the prequel. This follows a girl who has magical powers. There is an alien who had come to Earth like thousands of years ago who had been carefully like breeding humans together to create like a master race with these magical or psychic powers, and now this girl I think is going to try and lead a revolution against him so that the people who have these special powers can be free. That's my impression of what this story is about. Then I have two books that, to be totally honest, were definitely cover buys. So the first one is Lifelike by Jay Kristoff. I've actually never read anything else by Jay Kristoff. I know that he's a pretty popular author. He has a couple different series that are very popular and I haven't read any of them. And the reason I decided to buy this one is because I like the cover, because it is gold and it has this honeycomb pattern and I just like it a lot. This follows a girl, Eve, who has some kind of special powers, and so people are after her for two reasons. One, I think she has something to do with like gambling and there is a bookie who is after her, but also people are after her because of her special powers and she's kind of trying to figure out what they are, how to use them, why she has them. And I think this also, it is a science fiction story, so it has lots of like robots and AI and other things like that. So we'll see. I hope it's good. And my other cover buy was Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. This one, I have heard some positive things about it, but again, I don't even really know what it's about. I just love this cover a lot. I love the black and the gold, and it has like this little key here, and there's like a hand, and then this like color gradient of the really vibrant oranges and yellows. It just makes my eyes really happy, so I wanted the book. But I mean, it's another one where I read the description and it sounds interesting, but then I have no idea how to explain what it's about. I know that there is a thief, and I love thieves in stories. That's a fun trope that I usually enjoy. I think there is also a magical talking key that I have heard is very funny and very sassy. So, you know, it sounds like it has some real potential. Then I have a couple of novellas that I got. Two of them are from the same series, which are The Lost Child of Lichfurred and A Long Day in Lichfurred. So these are the second two books in the Witches of Lichfurred trilogy, but these books follow three witches who live in modern day England. I think in the last book they actually talk about like Brexit and stuff, so it's very like current modern day kind of thing. But they live in a small town in England which just happens to be on a boundary between our world and a magical world, and this town is kind of set up in a special way so that it protects this boundary so that evil things cannot come from the magical world into our world, and these three witches have to work together. They are very different from one another, but they have to work together to protect this boundary and protect our world from having this boundary be broken. And the other novella that I got is Finding Baba Yaga by Jane Yolen. This one just came out. It just says that there's a young girl with a harsh, controlling father and a house that feels anything but home, and she escapes and finds Baba Yaga, and Natasha, the girl, finds her voice, her power, and herself. That's most of the description of this. Also, though, it says that this is told in verse, which is really interesting because I don't think I've ever read a book that was told in verse. I actually don't know if I've ever read a retelling of Baba Yaga. Like, I kind of know the story, but I have never really like known that much about it. Next up, I have 3 books that all kind of came from one like quest in my like book search. So recently I have been wanting to read more fantasy books that either featured Jewish characters or were a fantasy world in which the world building incorporated like Jewish culture or Jewish like ideas or things like that into the world building. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned on my channel before, but I am Jewish, and so I've been wanting to read more books that have Jewish characters in them, but I really like reading fantasy stories, and there isn't a lot of fantasy, especially high fantasy, that has either Jewish characters or Judaism as part of the world building. I have been searching for some books like this. I found 3 right now. 2 of them are new releases, so you might already know what they are, but I'm excited about them. And the first one that I have here is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This one just came out this year and there's been a lot of buzz about it. This is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and one of the main characters in it is Jewish. Naomi Novik originally wrote a short story that was part of an anthology called The Starlit Wood, and so I read The Starlit Wood and it had that short story in it, and it was like okay. It wasn't my favorite. I also was like, you know, there wasn't anything like wrong with it, but I also was like, I don't know if this is the best like rep that's in it. I don't know. So I'm a little like hesitant about this one. The next book that I have is kind of similar, that it's also a fairy tale retelling, which is The Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rossner. And so this, I have heard that it is a loose retelling of The Goblin Market, which is a fairy tale that I don't know very well, but I am really interested to read more about. It follows 2 Jewish sisters in the Ukraine, I believe. One of them gets kidnapped and the other has to go and save her sister. And I am assuming that it's going to have really good like wintry vibes, so I want to read this in the winter. Spinning Silver also, because that has very wintry vibes as well. Also, from my research of the author, I know that Rena Rossner is Jewish and she is practicing. I think that will be interesting to see how that affects the representation of the Jewish characters and culture and experience in this story. I am really looking forward to this one. I have heard some really good things about it. I have heard that it incorporates a lot of Jewish culture into it, and I'm really looking forward to this one especially. And the last book that I have from the results of this search that I was doing is a little different, but it is Silent Hall by N.S. Dulcart, and this is one that is a high fantasy story in which there aren't like Jewish characters. It is that Judaism is a part of the world building of this story. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out in this. I think this follows a group of refugees who are looking for a way to save themselves. They find a wizard who is able to help them. So this story has, I think it has wizards and fairies and dragons and all kinds of great high fantasy staples. But I actually have also, when I was searching for books and I found this one, I found some articles that were interviews with the author where he was talking about the different ways that his writing and storytelling were influenced by like the Talmud, and how some of like how 4 of the main characters, he wrote them, and as he was writing he realized that they were essentially representing the 4 children from the Passover Seder. So like all of these little bits and pieces are woven into the story, and I'm so interested to see how that plays out in a high fantasy story. I'm really looking forward to this one because I've never found something like this that is a high fantasy story that has Judaism or Jewish culture or references just like woven into the world. And last up in my book haul, I actually got some nonfiction books as well. I used to read nonfiction more, but in the last few years, I really have stopped. And just recently, I started reading nonfiction again, which has been really interesting. And part of what has kind of sparked that is that I would listen to the audiobook of some nonfiction books, but what kept happening is that I would start listening to the audiobook and then I would be like taking notes as I was listening, and I was like, if I just had the book, then I could just like underline or like take notes in the margins, which I know that like a lot of people on BookTube are like writing in your books is like sacrilege, but I do that sometimes, especially in nonfiction books, because I want to remember things from like information from what I've been reading. Anyways, so some of these are ones that I picked up because I was listening to the audiobook. The first one that I have that is the case for is Braving the Wilderness, The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone by Brene Brown. Brene Brown is a researcher who does a lot of research on like vulnerability and shame and a lot of those like less comfortable human experiences, but how they impact us and how we can use them to like live our lives more fully. The other book that I listened to the audiobook and then picked up was Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. So this is a book about creative living, as you may have guessed. So Elizabeth Gilbert is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, but this one is about creative living, what is creativity and creative living, how to live a creative life, and what in our lives prevents us from living creatively. Then I have one that I have not read yet, which is Wicca, A Modern Guide to Witchcraft and Magic by Harmony Nice. I got this book because Harmony Nice is a YouTuber that I watch that I absolutely love. She is Wiccan. She makes a lot of videos about Wicca, about witchcraft, about different forms of paganism, about her own practice and the different holidays. It's just really fascinating and I love watching her videos. She's so interesting and she just recently came out with a book, and even though I don't plan to practice Wicca, I wanted to support her as a YouTuber that I really love, so I bought her book, and I love books, so I'm happy to have it. It's a very pretty book also, and I probably will flip through it and read parts of it because I do think that Wicca is a really interesting religion and I would like to learn more about it, which is part of why I watch her videos. Then I have The Complete Enneagram, 27 Paths to Greater Self-Knowledge by Beatrice Chestnut. So this is about the Enneagram, which is a personality assessment. I love personality assessments. I am actually trained in a few of them. And the Enneagram is not one that I am trained in, but I have read quite a bit about it. But recently I have been wanting to kind of get back into it because it's been quite a few years since I have really read that much about the Enneagram, and I am actually working on a project right now that is using the Enneagram, so I'm going to be doing some more research on it again, and I thought I would update my collection of Enneagram books, and I got this one to add. And last up, I have Flourish by Martin E.P. Seligman. This is actually not a book that I bought. I borrowed this from my mom, so this is one that is probably not going to stay on my shelf. It's going to go back to her. But I got this one actually for school, for one of my classes. One of our assignments is that we have to do a book review, and this is one of the book options that we had for the class. Seligman is kind of like the authority on like happiness and well-being research. Actually, I guess the subtitle to this is A Visionary New Understanding of Happiness and Well-Being. So, but happiness and well-being are topics that I think are really, really interesting. So I am glad that I got this book for my book review. So that is all for my August, September, October book haul. Yeah, I think those are all of the months that those books were accumulated over. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, and thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!